panel of the day, and we're talking about mental energy. And am I cheeky in saying I think it might be the most important panel of the day? And do you know why? Because you can't achieve anything unless you have the foundations right? You don't have mental energy, you don't have that resilience, everything is impossible. I think we listened to the amazing keynote just now, and everything he spoke about was defined by that mindset. So, of course, you've talked about sustainability and lots of your amazing goals that really affect your industry. But without this and this final panel, I think we can't make any journey. We can't go on that journey towards a better sustainable future without getting this right. So I'm very excited. Now, you might be wondering who the hell I am. Who is this person on stage telling us random stuff? Well, my name is Ayo Sokale, and I'm a chartered civil engineer. And that means that basically I'm a superhero. I'll tell you why. But more importantly, I work in flood and coastal risk management, and that means that I protect people's homes from flooding. So I am a superhero. And my institution agreed. They made me an animated superhero. So if you want to see that, Google. But this is so important because you might be wondering, why is this pertinent to what you do? Why does a chartered civil engineer working in flood and coastal risk management, managing multi-billion-pound projects, have to do with you guys and what you're doing? Well, it's the same thing. We work in an industry that's tirelessly driven by programs, targets, politics, and all these things can add quite a lot of stress to everyone in our industry. We're constantly in a state of heightened alert. It's one deadline after one deadline, and everything is urgent. And therefore, this can take quite a toll on mental resilience and mental energy. The first question is, to see your approach on what mental energy is for you, what do you define it to be? And what do you think the challenges and barriers that people might face in this regard?
Well, I think, again, we've covered that on the previous session before. Mental energy is all the energy that literally starts from within. So first of all, it's like, I think we all can agree that we absorb pretty much everything around us, It doesn't matter if it's like sensation or media or just connections that we might, get throughout the day. So that impacts our lives. So it's really important to understand what we consume and with who are we, or by who we actually are surrounded with. And actually from then on start to select with what we actually define ourselves. So moving from then on, that's how you kind of like build your portfolio or your surrounding. So I think you have, or you should surround yourself with good people, with people who are inspiring, with people that motivate you, people that give you maybe other senses of purpose as well. So I think it really starts from there.
So might I paraphrase your words to see that I understand your meaning? So mental energy to you is controlling the environment as best as you can to ensure that you're digesting good stuff and surrounded by good people that give you that community and resilience and inspiration to keep going.
Absolutely.
Now, over to you. What are your views on mental energy? And what do you think the barriers to overcoming some of the challenges are?
Yeah, so for me, it was as I spoke about in the thing, it's about not sweating stuff that's out of our control, because I think we spend so much time worrying about things that we have no control over. So I think and in the industry, I mean, you were working, it's very different, you had to put things in place, but as individuals, people got so wrapped up and worried about COVID. There's nothing we could really do about it apart from doing what we was asked to do. If we do what we're asked to do, then we don't necessarily need to worry about the virus itself, because there's people with better brains than I've got that are trying to sort that stuff out. I just do what I'm asked. And it was the same with the athletics. Don't worry about the other stuff. Don't worry about you're obviously watching what other people are up to, but you're not worrying about what they're up to because you can't influence that. Worry about yourself and your own deliveries, your own performances, or what you do day to day, looking after yourself. And then I agree with Jason, it's all about who you surround yourself with. If you surround yourself with draining people, they're going to drain you. If you surround yourself with positive, driven people, they're going to help get you to where you want to get to. And they don't necessarily need to help you get there because you're going to be lifted by their energy as well. So the training group I was in, very, very driven, motivated people, because they were all like-minded. It was how can they be the best they can be? So we'd turn up every day trying to be better. But if we didn't, we understood that as well, right? No one beat themselves up, and we'd analyse what went wrong, have a good laugh about it, because it was usually in front of a camera, and when things go wrong on an athletics track, they go horribly wrong sometimes. But we have to have made all those mistakes as well to have ever got to a point to be successful. We often think about, in sport, we say there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. Of course, it feels like a failure when you miss out on a gold medal, or especially in the 800 when you've gone off like a lunatic and you think you're going to break the world record. Everybody else in the crowd and on the track knows what's coming, and then eventually it comes. But there's not an 800 metre runner on the planet that hasn't made that mistake. So when you make that mistake, you just make sure you learn from it before you move on. Then it's not a failure. There's something learned. There's always something to take forward. And I think that stops dragging us back all the time as well. Not living in the past, living in the future, living where you are now.
I love that. So the next question is more about challenge, and I want to frame it in this really interesting way. See, I'm obsessed with stories and heroes and villains and Marvel and everything, because I think there's something really interesting in the stories that are in our collective consciousness and what they can teach us. So Joseph Campbell, one of my favourite authors, talks about it, the hero's journey and the embarking on this great adventure, and that call to adventure and listening to the call. Listening to the call to adventure means you're embarking on challenge, right? So how do you guys prepare yourself to go on that hero's journey and embark on these mega challenges that we're facing? What do you guys do?
So for me, everything I've done in my life has been with a similar approach. What's the worst that can happen, right? And of course, sometimes there is bad things that can happen, but generally in life there isn't. So when I was eventually decided to go back into rugby, for example, I never knew I'd be able to play again, but I wanted to just get fit. So I figured I'd go and try and get fit and play rugby again, just use the training because it's back with my team. And then the plan was to try and play a match. But what's the worst that happens, right? It doesn't work out, and I just go back to training. So that's what I did, and I played and realised I could play, and I carried on playing. Then when I started looking at scuba diving, I never thought or never realised I'd be able to be an instructor. You have to understand with scuba diving, it's like when you're training to be an instructor, you're responsible for other people underwater. When they get to the rescue part of the programme, there is no sort of grey area. There is no, Dan, don't worry, you've got a disability, we'll just tick you off on that one. It's like you either can rescue people or you can't, and if you can't, you fail. So I had to pass that. I had to find ways to be able to do all the skills you have to be able to do. But I got to a dive master level, which is the first level of professionalism, and I thought, well, if I go to become an instructor, what's the worst that happens? The worst that happens is I don't make it. I go back to being a dive master, but I'll be a better dive master because I've done the instructor's training. Then with my athletics, when I was training for the 4, and it became apparent that I just couldn't get physically faster, which I needed to be a little bit physically faster. So my coach said, well, we can't get you faster, Dan, so we're going to get you stronger. So we're going to do some 800 metre training. And as I started doing the 800 metre training, I really took to it. And we said, okay, let's look at the 8 and just see if it's a possibility. And we went with that. What's the worst that can happen, right? Well, the worst that happens is the 8 doesn't work out. I go back to the 4, having done all this extra training, so I'll be fitter, stronger, because I've done all this extra training. And that's how I've tried to approach my life as I've gone through, with that mindset of like, give it a go. What's the worst that'll happen?
What's the worst that can happen?
It's kind of worked out right at times, you know. Sometimes it doesn't.
Or just all right.
Well, sometimes it goes horribly wrong. But like when I tried to cook fish on MasterChef, and those really stepped outside my comfort zone. But even then, you learn stuff. Right? There's always something to learn.
I love that. Thank you, Danny. Jason, over to you. How do you do this?
I can very much underline what Dan said. I think it's some things you're just gonna have to just go with it and then figure out. And sometimes you believe that you are very well prepared and you have the master plan and you completely fail. So I don't really think there is a perfect strategy to it, but I always encourage people to use different strategies for different things as well. And also learn to be in an uncomfortable zone, but also learn preparing yourself in so many ways. I think specifically when you look at sports or athletics, specifically, or if you look like career, myself, if I take myself as an example, I've always been like driven by hospitality. So I spent 15 years, just a little around 15 years in hospitality, 10 of these in bars. And I was young when I started to work in bars, but I was so driven, and very swiftly, a couple of years afterwards, my team and the venue where where I was working was one of the best bars in Switzerland. So that's so motivating. So then finally, I kind of like just got into this. But now you realize that, oh, okay, wow, there is actually, there might also be a structure behind it to, get the last little inch. So how do I look at the whole thing and the whole picture? How do I get better? What are other people doing? What are they doing good? Or what are they doing that I don't necessarily like? So you start to maybe plan a strategy around this, and this might be a strategy for 2, 3, 4 years, etc. And then you work on these and move on and move on and move on. So yeah, planning helps very well. But again, I think it's also great to be spontaneous sometimes.
I love that. Both of you have kind of said the opposite and the same thing. So it's about planning and being prepared, but then also this other element of going for things and not really knowing how it's going to work out. So in my point of view, obviously it can be quite challenging to go for something not knowing the outcome. So my thought on this is always to almost start from regulating your own nervous system. You see, when we talk about mental energy, mental awareness, mental resilience, it all starts with where you are as your baseline. When you embark on a challenge, you put yourself in an uncomfortable zone. However, so many people, especially in the hospitality industry, based on my research and homework, it's a very hugely stressful, demanding job with lots of different factors to consider. So often people already start off with a really dysregulated nervous system. So this means that any additional stress takes people right over the edge. So what can you do to actually get yourself in a good position to embark on the challenge? Regulate your nervous system. Now, what does that actually mean? This means things like taking time for well-being. It might be meditating. That isn't for everyone. It could be simply going for a walk. It could be simply finding yourself time in nature and just rebalancing and getting yourself to a calm state. You see, to embark on a challenge and to do something that you've never done before, you need as much mental capacity and bandwidth as possible. So you need to set yourself up for success. This is one of the greatest pieces of advice one of my mentors gave me. He said, you set yourself up for success, and then you do the scary bit. Then you take the challenge that you don't really know how it's going to work out, and then you get that successful experience in doing that quite scary thing. Hopefully it works out, and then you become more competent as a result. Then you become more confident, and then the cycle repeats and repeats and repeats. And with those consistent actions, you just never know where you're going to end up. So, the topic of mental energy is a very individual one. So how can operators ensure that they're helping their employees to take the time to look after their own mental well-being and be a positive influence on this? Now, I'm going to go to Jason first on this one. I'm really interested because you've been in industry for 20 years.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I think one of the first thoughts would be observation. I think as busy as your shift might be, you are a leader, or you might be just a colleague as well. And as it doesn't matter how busy it is, just be aware of your space and look at your peoples as well. So I think it doesn't matter in which position you are. I think that's point number one that you should always look at. So you get a bit of the energy of your surrounding, of the people around you, but also you get the energy, you get the feeling, but also you get the understanding how people actually do things, and that very swiftly concludes to some of their mental energy or mental behaviors. Then obviously the other part is communication. We spoke about this a lot. So find out, connect with people, connect with them, find out how they feel about certain things. Have open chats. The more that you discuss with someone, the more that you can maybe get some information. So the more you can draw a picture about that specific human being, and that's how you do it all across the whole team. So obviously again, a CEO or whatever type of manager you are, you can't maybe do it down the line with every single person. But again, through communication, you might get these pieces of information about a bunch of a team from one of their leaders, etc., etc. So it's all down to having that communication first.
Thank you. And Danny, what are your thoughts on this? Give us a different perspective on it.
Oh, no, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, one of the things I do a lot of, I do one-to-one coaching with clients, and a lot of it is business leaders, execs, directors, CEOs, people like that, and usually, and it doesn't matter who they are. Generally the script is quite similar. What they come to you with, the problems they come to you with, and a lot of it is, the overload, the overwhelm. They're just snowed under, and they're struggling, and they're treading water, and that obviously then impacts their home life because you're the same person that walks out the front door that goes into the office. Right? You can't be a different person, so the same stresses sort of translate across. And then they're worried about their team, you know, and often because they're overloaded, they then don't want to put things on their team, so they'll be taking on more themselves. And one of the first pieces of work I'll always end up doing with them is and I call it, is like put your oxygen mask on first. You cannot support and help other people, be that at home or be that within the world of business, if you don't look after yourself first, because you're already too overloaded. And it's amazing that nearly everyone I work with is exactly the same. And as soon as you start digging a bit deeper, it's like, well, you know, what used to make you happy? I used to love playing squash, right? You go, so when was the last time you played squash? I haven't had time. Okay, so how's that working out for you? A bit stressed. What did you use squash for? Well, I used to like go and de-stress on the way home from work. So actually, if you managed to make that happen, how would that work out for you then? And you just put it back in their life, and within days, weeks, they suddenly realise how important that was. I had a guy that I worked with, and he used to love driving through London. I don't know why you would, but that was his thing, right? And he said he's just too busy now. And where he lives closer to the office. And I said, well, if you speak to your family and you tell your wife the reason why, because that's when he sort of processed in his mind and cleared his mind. I said, well, just take the long drive home. You can't do it every day. There might be stuff at home you've got to do, but on the days you haven't, go the long way home. As long as your family knows that's what you're doing and they're not waiting for you, then you know that then enables you to process, which means you then walk in the front door a better person. You can deal with all the stuff, your children and stuff. So for me, that is the important thing. It's always, you know, before you can help others, you've got to help yourself. Because if you're already struggling yourself, you don't have the capacity. Yes, you want to try to, especially as a leader and as a boss, but you don't necessarily always have that capacity to do it. So put that oxygen mask on first.
I love that. Both Jason and Danny, perfect, amazing answers. And I really want to dig deep into that. Because I like what you said, Jason, about being a leader. And that doesn't mean just being the team leader on site, but everyone being a leader when they're working and noticing those things, noticing each other, noticing their surroundings, being aware. So we talked about staff perception. Now let's talk about how can I pull up some similarities from the hospitality industry to athletics, particularly for you, Danny, because I really want to understand your understanding of the role of exercise in mental energy. Because you're an athlete, we're talking about hospitality. What do they need to do in terms of looking after their physical vehicles, these vessels we're in, to make sure they're in a good position to have good mental energy? Yeah,
we all know movement makes us feel good, right? Not everyone has to run. You have to find what works for you. But the evidence I have is how I felt as an athlete. And I can promise you, we had a lot, when you take into account the amount of pressure and stress that is put on an athlete. And yes, athletes are known, they do struggle with mental health sometimes, or mental ill health. But generally, most athletes are fairly well. And it's because we're constantly moving and we're doing stuff that's energetic and actually we're doing stuff we love, right? You don't run every day if you don't like running. So I was doing what made me happy. Now, not everyone's going to agree. I think when the sun's out, one of the best places on the planet is on an athletics track in the warmth. That's not everyone's idea of a great day out. But of course, not every day was like that for me. Some days it's raining sideways, as it often is in this country. But I still loved my running so much that's what gave me my happiness, right? Just being out there running. I don't do that now for my happiness. I don't do running for happiness because I did it as a job. So I find other things that make me happy. But yeah, I think for me it's so important and it just gives you that. But as you said, you go for your run every morning. It's not necessarily.
Thank you very much.
It's not necessarily about the activity. Yes, there's the health benefits that go with sport and activity, but it doesn't have to be sport. It can be anything. You know, physical activity, yes, has other benefits as well. But it's just finding that thing that puts a smile on your face. And especially if you are able to do it at the start of your day, it sets you up. Or if you've got it at the end of your day, you've got something to work towards and look towards the end of your day. And I think that is one of the most important things, is to have those bits built into your life and actually to make time for them as well. And especially in this world we suddenly found ourselves in, where we were stuck at home all the time, or you know, even if you're back out working in hospitality trade, there's still a lot of virtual stuff now, isn't it? If you get 1 minute in your diary, someone chucks a meeting in there now, and suddenly you don't have a break, you don't have lunch breaks, you don't have time to do anything. And actually it's so important to put all these things back in, because your own time and space is really important to you. And I think when I look back during my athletics career, some of my best performances in terms of like my training was when I had tough things going on in the background, and as an athlete, there's kind of a thought that you leave it at the track, or in business you leave it at the door, right? You don't bring that stuff to work. But as I said previously, you kind of have to, right? Because there's not two people. And if you have got stressful stuff going on at home and you leave it at home and you come to work a different person, you're then a different person at work. And actually as employers and leaders, one of the things like my business work on is understand people, ask the questions like you say, because actually you can support your employees, you can support the people you work with better if you can help them earlier, rather than when it gets to a point and they break and then you've got them off work and it's a long-term thing. You might be able to support them earlier. And I think I used my sport to do that. So when I had tough times at home, I could then take it out on the track, right?
Yeah.
But I had to also be mindful of the fact that I didn't, I wasn't hiding away from it. I was using my athletics and the people around me and the environment I was in to sort of fix other things as well.
Thank you, Danny. I'm going to go to Jason, because obviously you actually spent 15 years behind the bar, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that schedule doesn't quite fit in with going for runs and looking after yourself and hitting the gym. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, I agree. I've done it for many, many years, where you just go and work your 12, 14 hours, and then you get home, you're so tired, you go to bed, and you wake up the next day and start again. And then suddenly this is 6 days a week, and then your last day, only day off that you have, you just stay in bed on your sofa, and then you start the week again. So we've all been there, more or less, I suppose. And the thing is, like, I understand how challenging this is, but also I have understood throughout the years that if I invest a minute every morning in something small that makes me happy, then actually I'm overall more happy. And if I invest 2 minutes in that specific thing, or if I invest 2 minutes split in two different things that I actually enjoy doing, then I am even more happy. Now, this just sounds so ridiculous, just spending 2 minutes a day in something. But actually, the magic in there is that I am spending 2 days a day throughout the week. So this might be 5, 6 days. So suddenly we speak about 10 minutes a week that I do something great. And the more you do this, the more that you might actually add time to, or you might take more time to these little things. So the perception often is around well-being or sports is always like, oh, if you want to be fit, you're going to have to go 1.5 hours in the gym 3 times a week. Well, it would be great, but it's actually not necessary. So you can also just exercise 5, 10 minutes a day, and this is actually incredibly beneficial for you, physically and mentally. And for your heart, very important. So these aren't just like, it's all about finding these little moments. But then again, I know how it is, like life, you get carried away through life. Yeah. You try to find time somewhere, and then there's always something that pops up. Well, a good way to actually get around that is just planning these things ahead. So it's all about like really thinking of how do I implement habits into my daily life. So if tonight I go to bed and I set up, because that's what I'm doing tomorrow. Tomorrow I have to, it's way too early, I know, but I know already that tomorrow I need to wake up at 6 o'clock, and between 7 and 8 tomorrow I'm in the gym. And I have this since 2 days in my head. So what's going to happen tomorrow? I'm going to get up and going to go to the gym, because that's the way my brain is programmed since a couple of days probably. And if I plan my whole week ahead, well, then I'm actually more likely to do these little things. So again, you look at your schedule, you might be busy, but actually if you put some of these things as your priority, then you're more likely to do them. Because in the end of the day, we all have the same 24 hours, don't we? And it's all about what you prioritize. But then again, it doesn't jeopardize the amount of work that I'm going to have at the end of the day, because I'm still going to have to work these 8, 10, 12 hours anyway. But again, it's by starting with these little things that benefits you actually more, and these actually give you more energy that you can run through the whole day.
Thank you both, Jason and Danny. Can we have the biggest, most enthusiastic round of applause for our fantastic panelists?